Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 38 of the Anime Banter podcast with your hosts Turtle, Sean, and Mike. Thank you for joining us today. How are the two of you doing?
Doing pretty well. How about you guys?
Doing all right. Actually, not feeling totally great today, but I'm here to bring entertainment to our listenership.
I am very excited to talk about these two episodes because there was a lot that happened.
Yeah, there was. These two were quite the doozy.
Yeah, we should dive right in.
I was gonna say these two episodes are bangers. They ended the show with some bangers of episodes. Episode 7, To Scott, To Pilgrim. Love the episode name.
Also love it. It's really funny.
Episode begins and we see Scott getting pulled through the vegan portal, which is actually pulling him through time. And Scott attempts to fight the person who pulled him through the portal to no avail. Scott then they land. The city looks sort of run down, like the vegetation is overtaking the city. And Scott asks the masked figure, "Where are we?" And I love how it's the narrator who says, "Toronto, Canada." And then Scott's like, "Oh, okay. When are we?" And the narrator says, "The future." You can see the future.
I'm on fire!
The masked figure removes his mask to unveil a bearded Scott Pilgrim, age 37, with a rating of awesome. The title card for this episode, I don't know if you guys think it was too meta or not, but the title card is a reference to the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game. It uses the same font for that game's title screen.
I did not catch what this reference was.
I did not either. I was wondering. I'm staring at it. I'm like, do I know what this is? I don't think I do.
It used the color scheme from the Too Fast, Too Furious movie poster, but the font was from the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game. Which honestly felt like it should have been saved for next episode, seeing that the episode is titled Scott Pilgrim vs. the World.
Fair.
But here we are. To start things off, we not in the episode, but pretty cool. Will Forte plays the voice of Old Scott instead of having Michael Cera playing both normal, everyday Scott Pilgrim and older Scott Pilgrim.
It's actually kind of funny because my wife my wife hates Will Forte. Like everything he's in, she just hates. I don't know what it is. She just doesn't like him. Meanwhile, when I was watching like SNL when I was younger, like Saturday Night Live, I thought he was absolutely hilarious. So I was down with it.
I could see both points. Like, I'm okay with Will Forte. There are some things where I'm like, but like for the most part, I really like Will Forte, and I always thought he was funny on SNL. But I could totally see why people don't like Will Forte. And going forward, for now, we're going to call young, like present day Scott as young Scott, and Will Forte's Scott as older Scott, as old Scott. Young Scott is amazed by the future and is impressed that they can grow a beard in the future. And old Scott's like, "Yeah, it's great, isn't it? You're the first person to like compliment me on it. Thanks."
I respect the beard, as I'm growing one for winter myself.
I'm not growing one on purpose. I'm just too lazy to shave.
Grow it out, Sean.
Say it's on purpose. It's all good.
Just think how much warmer your face will be in the cold, frigid months coming soon.
It makes a difference.
I am prepped for that. I am prepping for that. Not gonna enjoy it.
Young Scott asks old Scott why he was brought to the future as he was in the middle of fighting some dude who he thinks was part of a hockey league or something. And young Scott asks what happened with the fights. And old Scott says, "Oh yeah, biggest mistake of my life. We won against the League of Evil Exes." He's like, "Ah, that's right. That's who that guy was a part of." I love young Scott's just like obliviousness to it. It's like you were just fighting this dude like 5 minutes ago, and you completely forget like that he was part of a thing called the League of Evil Exes, and the fact that he mistook it for a hockey league, which is a very Canadian thing. So they go into the house, and young Scott's just amazed. He's like, "Whoa, I live here? This is my house? This is incredible. And they walk down some steps, and there's a chamber called the VR chamber. And young Scott is just like, VR in the future? Whoa.
Love the reaction to VR. But I'm like, oh, VR, that's funny. But well, wait till he gets in there, and it gets way funnier.
I was gonna say, it's like, okay, yeah, VR. I could totally understand, like, that reaction, like, if you're coming from, like, 2010 to current day where you had the MetaQuest and everything. They then open the VR chamber, and sitting there on the table is what the show is calling a virtual guy. But for us video game historians, it's a virtual boy.
That had me laughing so hard. And can we talk real quick? The door to get into the virtual room was in the shape of the classic Game Boy.
Yeah, the shape of the door. You said.
Yeah. Yeah, he had to use like the D-pad to get into the chamber, but it was shaped like the original Game Boy.
That was pretty great.
I loved it. I wish I still had mine.
I was thinking of the room. How like the room itself was shaped like when you go down the stairs.
Yes.
The Virtual Boy that was shaped like a controller.
Yeah, the Virtual Boy controller.
Yeah, like fantastic design there. Like love that.
Very good. I never had a Virtual Boy, but I did have the old, brick Game Boy, which I wish I still had. I broke mine.
Oh, I still have my brick Game Boy. I never had the Virtual Boy.
I do too.
I don't know if many people had the Virtual Boy.
I don't know a single person.
For any any fans out there of the Angry Video Game Nerd, he covered the Virtual Boy. I think there were literally like 13 games in total that were ever made. It's not a lot.
I did really love the references, the video game references in this VR chamber and outside it. The two Scotts walk up to the virtual guy, and old Scott pulls out a cassette or a tape for the virtual guy, and it says memories with the word good scratched out. He loads it into the virtual guy, and Scott's like, "Oh, this is great!" And like, we pretty much get a montage of like from the movie of all the evil exes that Scott fought. And like Scott's like, "Oh, there's that guy I was fighting. Oh, that guy died from skateboarding. Oh, that's weird." And then he says that's weird about Ramona and Gideon, and Ramona being on a leash to Gideon. And old Scott's like, yeah, a lot of red flags there." I love how young Scott's like, everything's red, which plays into the virtual boy even more. It's fantastic. We then see Scott and Ramona get married, and they have a honeymoon at Universal, and they're hanging out with minions. And Scott's like, "This is great. This all looks like so much fun and such a great life." And we see like a happy anniversary, and it's like, "Oh, this is so sweet." And then we learn that Ramona and old Scott get divorced, and young Scott's like, "This style of this memory, this scene is way worse. Like, go back to the old stuff. This scene is this style sucks." After using the virtual guy, they go into old Scott's garage, and there we see all the band equipment still. And young Scott's like, "Yeah, Sex Bomb's still going. This is great." And old Scott's like, "Nah, Sex Bomb, that died. I got a new band with the twins. Do you want to see our new music video?" And it has a very anime feel to it.
Was he not speaking Japanese in some of the lyrics?
Yeah, he was. I was baffled by this music video. Like, I'm like, is this a reference to something that I'm just not like that I'm missing? Like someone might do a parody to a music video, and it's like the "Aha Take on Me" video, and be like, oh yeah, like I get that reference. But I was like, am I missing a reference here, or does it just look like a goofy generic Japanese music video, which I'm also down with.
I really like the tornado with Scott's face, like in the sky, looking down on them. It was very funny.
Thing of beauty.
After the video plays, old Scott's bragging. He's like, "Yeah, has over 100 views. Sort of a big deal." And young Scott's like, "That doesn't seem like a lot." And as they're talking, young Scott's looking around the garage, and he starts noticing all this stuff, and we get the Wallace stuff bit again. And he's like, "Why is all of Wallace's stuff in your garage?" and we find out that old Scott is still living with Wallace.
That made me laugh.
The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Wallace shows up, and we learn he is now 39 years young, not years old, and has a rating of 11 out of 10.
Good rating.
It is. Wallace is shocked to see two Scotts, and even makes mention of Sonic the Hedgehog, which I love that callback from episode 1. Wallace says his sugar daddy of a husband bought the house, and old Scott is like, Wallace, don't tell him who your husband is. He's not ready for it. Wallace is like, he needs to know. I'm thinking like, who is like, did Wallace marry like Todd Ingram? Like, did he marry someone from Scott's past? Like, the way old Scott is like, you can't tell him who your husband is. I'm like, who the hell is it? And then we learn Wallace is married to someone at Nintendo, and young Scott just sort of like starts floating on air. He's like, what? Like Nintendo? And he's just like amazed. His eyes are like doe eyes and he has sparkles. He's like, this is the best news ever. Do you get all the games for free? And old Scott's like, yeah, we get all the games for free. And Wallace's like, no, we don't.
Yeah, that always cracks me up. One of my favorite memes online is when they're talking about rumors for a video game, and like my uncle works at Nintendo, and he said that the new Zelda game is gonna have, I don't know, something in it, right? So I don't know, the meme of like my uncle works at Nintendo, like that's what, like he like my husband works at Nintendo, and people be like, sure he does, pal, sure he does, because no one believes anyone who says their uncle works at Nintendo.
Yep. It's fantastic.
I feel bad for everybody who actually has a Nintendo or an uncle who works for Nintendo because they're like, "Oh no, my uncle actually works for Nintendo." Yeah, right.
No
Uh-huh.
one will believe him.
Everybody says that. He's like, "No, for real, he does."
Young Scott then asks, okay, well, why are we still living with Wallace then? And old Scott's like, oh, we aren't. We're just crashing here until we figure out the Ramona situation. Young Scott's then like, okay, well, where's Wallace's husband at? And Wallace is like, he's been at work for the past couple weeks. And old Scott's like, oh yeah, he must have been there for a while now, huh? Just sort of throwing some shade. And then I love how young Scott takes a shot at Wallace about his husband. And Wallace is like, young Scott, like, and young Scott's like, wait, hold on. I'm not young Scott. I'm regular Scott. That's old Scott. And then Wallace is like, fine, regular Scott, shut up.
I like when the show calls out its own ridiculousness. We talk about them getting levels of meta and breaking the fourth wall a little bit, and I love in the show when things get super ridiculous, the characters just kind of roll with it. Like they just accept the absurd. And I love that. Like that nothing brings me more joy than characters just accepting when things just don't make sense.
Wallace asks why there are two Scotts in his kitchen. And old Scott blames Wallace because Wallace said, oh, it's a shame you can't go back in time to stop you from dating Ramona. And old Scott just completely misses on the sarcasm like that Wallace was throwing. So old Scott goes to the twins and says, "Oh hey, can you guys create a time machine?" They're like, "Oh yeah, that's kid stuff. That's easy." And young Scott is mad that old Scott pulled him away from Ramona on purpose. Old Scott was saying, "Oh no, I didn't just pull you away from Ramona on purpose. I was looking for someone to play two-player side-scrolling beat 'em up games with me."
That made me chuckle because I thought of the video game. There it was. It took all the way to episode 7 for them to reference the game.
I wonder, is the game available on modern consoles, like outside of PC?
Yeah, it's on PS5.
Okay, I wasn't sure if they updated it.
I was gonna say I think it's on Switch too.
I'm pretty sure it is. I'm pretty sure it's on on everything, I believe. Steam looks like it's pretty much on everything. Steam, Switch, PS4, PS5, Xbox
Okay, yeah, I
platforms.
I wasn't sure if they, some games we throw a tangent here. I've been seeing some interesting content that people release that they're simply games, and it's this way with streaming services too. The fact that we've gone so digital and away from physical media, it means that there are thousands upon thousands of games lost to time because we can't get a physical version of that game. It just doesn't exist anymore. It's like in like a PS5 game. Someday you buy a PS5 game, and if you have the physical version, you'll be able to play it. But if PlayStation Store doesn't support the PS5 anymore, you may not be able to download all the patches that go with the game, right? So you'll have a base game, but you won't have all the stuff you need to actually play the full game, which is nuts to me that like there will be lost media. And there already is lost media, like PS3 direct download games that you just can't play now unless you have your old PS3.
Yeah, there's a lot of lost media. I know a lot of fans have done what they can to recover things and keep things available, but there's a lot of stuff that falls through, especially with digital, and it's sad.
I mean, Sony just deleted a bunch of videos from their platform within the past couple weeks. That even if you bought the digital video, they just removed it from your library.
Which is absolutely wild because usually when you buy it, the implication is that you get to keep that.
Yep. Like, it feels like that whole thing is just waiting for legislation. Like, it's going to happen to something so big and massive that it's going to, like, cause a massive class action lawsuit and cause, like, legislation across the world to step in.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of legislation, did you guys hear that? Did you guys take part in the Crunchyroll lawsuit?
No,
I
I didn't
don't
even know about it.
I don't
Yeah,
think I did either.
yeah, I got an email as a Crunchyroll member that there's a class action suit against Crunchyroll.
Huh.
Oh,
Yeah, check your email that you signed up with.
Interesting.
For the email comes from law offices, and yes, I did Google the law offices and the lawsuit to make sure it was legit, and I didn't just click a bad link. Um, yeah, it's a legit thing, but I'm gonna get a whole $6. It's gonna be great.
woo!
Woohoo! Not
I can get
can that
myself a
even
free
pay for
month of
a month?
Crunchyroll.
I was gonna say, can that even pay for a month of Crunchyroll?
Yeah, if it's 6, no, but I think 8 might.
I love those class action lawsuits. It's like you are entitled to financial compensation. It's like, how much are we talking? $2.
Yeah, I'm just googling it right now. It says you can be able to get about $30 as a max. So I don't know, $30 is $30, but I don't remember ever getting an email for this. If I did, I probably deleted it, so I'm not worried about $30.
Yeah, I podcast. I will give you updates when yeah, listeners. I will give you updates when I get my check or notice of how much I get for settlement. I know it's gonna be the spicy stuff that keeps you listening every week.
When will Sean get his check?
We're gonna start Sean class action lawsuit check watch. When I get my check 3 years from now, I'll still be laughing all the way to the bank. What's $30? Like 10 years from now, inflation adjusted. Three probably equivalent of $3.
I was gonna
Something
say
like
6.
at most. Anyways, back to the Scott Pilgrim. Young Scott accuses old Scott of screwing it up with Ramona, and old Scott's like, "Well, how would you blame me? It's not my fault." And he storms off. And Wallace says old Scott is taking it 10 times worse than when Envy dumped Scott. And young Scott's like, "Ooh."
Did she call his hair shaggy?
I've missed that not getting that reference either in this show.
Yeah, they didn't get that here. Yeah.
Scott learns that the robot records everything, and then they open up the robot's head and unplug and replug some wires, and Scott is able to start playing the robot like he's a virtual guy. And then in the real world, we see the robot like continuously running into a barrier.
That was funny. I really like that bit.
I laugh so hard at that.
All the people are just like staring at the robot like, what's going on?
And Scott's like, video games are awesome.
It's so bad. Can't even make it go forward.
We learn that Ramona, or in this case, older Ramona, is still delivering DVDs for Netflix, and her age is don't ask. She goes into a dark room, and we see two sets of eyes, and she starts beating up what ends up being Old Wallace and young Scott. And Wallace is like, stop, we come in peace. Ramona then pours tea for the three of them. We learn that young Neil wrote a memoir called. I needed to get a drink because this is the most ridiculous title ever. Scott and Ramona and me, my precious big life as Scott Pilgrim's best pal. And he is now going by Old Young Neil.
That got me. Old young Neil.
Also got me. Well, because I was thinking, was it in the movie? Doesn't he graduate from being young Neil to what?
Just
Just
Neil.
Neil? Just
Yeah.
Neil?
Yeah,
So I'm like,
Scott's
does he
like,
go from young Neil to old? Because he stays old young Neil. So you think you just go to old Neil?
yeah, Scott is the one who like graduates him from young Neil to just Neil in the movie. We learned that Ramona sent a copy of the memoir back in time, just in case old Scott succeeded in deleting everything, and she wanted young Scott to have a way to know what happened. We learned that her time machine are rollerblades made out of an old DeLorean, which I got a great laugh out of.
I did too. They even kept the 88 miles per hour bit.
Wallace then says, Ramona, young Scott doesn't read books. And Ramona's like, yeah, I thought of that. That's why I went back in time to write young Neil's screenplay.
And there's our answer.
Yep, that's the answer to our question. Well, it makes sense because like for a minute in my mind I was like, oh yeah, old Scott is the time traveler. But then you think about it, you're like, did old Scott really write a book?
No,
The answer
of
is I was gonna
course
say
not.
this man lives in Wallace's garage. He's not typing up a book.
Ramona says that she still loves Scott, no matter how poor her plan was. And Ramona's all upset that her plan failed. But Scott's like, your plan didn't fail. That's not the story I saw. And then we see a montage of Ramona looking for Scott in the previous episodes. And Scott's like, you're a famous detective or something. And she's like, you mean Columbo? And Scott's like, yeah, sure, we'll go with Columbo. I was going to say Detective Pikachu though.
So dumb.
So
So
yeah, but
dumb.
hold up, I'm throwing it out there. When did Detective Pikachu come out?
Like way after this, I
That's
thought.
what I was thinking. I was like, I feel like he's in the wrong era.
Well, there was the video game too,
There were the video games. That's true. Was he called
which
Detective Pikachu in that?
Yes, I think the game was called Detective Pikachu. I'm not sure when the original one came out, but I didn't think the sales were that great for that.
the original one came out in 2016. It looks like.
Okay.
Detective Pikachu video game?
Yeah, and then we just got a new one this year. So yeah, that is an odd reference.
Way later than the original source material for this, so yeah. I chuckled and then went, "Wait a minute,
That's how I felt too.
Maybe young Scott saw Detective Pikachu on the Virtual Guy or something.
maybe."
Yeah, only thing I can think of.
Ramona then has young Scott in her bag like she did with Lucas Lee, and they both tell Old Wallace to call his husband. And then we see Ramona starting to skate, and we see her picking up speed, and she gets to 88 miles per hour. And just like in Back to the Future, all we see are flaming tracks from the rollerblades. And we are back in the present day. And we also learn that this is why Scott is steaming, and that future Ramona is still there with him.
Can you imagine actually skating at 88 miles an hour? That'd be terrifying.
That's how people wreck and just die.
Yeah, like you trip or something, forget it, you're done.
Knives then gives Scott his jacket back, and Scott handles breaking up with Knives way better than he did in the movie. And like he's like, yeah, looking back, probably not the best idea for me to have dated you in the first place. Turns out people look down upon a 23-year-old dating a 17-year-old. Knives thanks Scott for dying so she can reflect and grow.
Also made me laugh.
I really liked this scene.
It was a good scene. I had said before, I don't remember the movie. I don't remember how this shook down, but like this was a good scene. I just wasn't ready for the thanks for dying bit. That got me.
Yeah, that cracked me up too. Yeah, at least Scott admits, in the movie, he admits that they dated them at the same time and it was wrong, but he never acknowledges that he should have never been dating a 17-year-old as a 23-year-old because he just shouldn't have been. So I'm glad he acknowledged it here that the society does not. I mean, I guess you can date that way if you really want to, but you just shouldn't. You just shouldn't.
It's not great. It's weird. Every time, like, I always have you heard about Dane Cook? I know his name hasn't he hasn't really been
Name I haven't heard in a
famous.
long time.
Yeah,
His sense of humor was very like product of the day,
yeah,
and I don't know if he's updated it.
yeah. But he is 51 now, and he just got married to his 24-year-old girlfriend. But they started dating when he was like when she was like 18 or like before she turned 18. And it was very creepy.
Wow.
If it was after she turned 18, then good. If it was before, not good. There's also like Leo DiCaprio who he dates like a new 18 or 19-year old, and then as soon as they turn like I don't know 23, 24, 25, he just dumps them and finds a new one.
Oh, that's nice.
He doesn't date anyone older than 25.
Yeah, that's what it is. 25. Yeah, that's the number.
Damn.
Uh, yeah. So it's kind of wild what you get away with as a celebrity. Oh, if Heroes, if you remember the show Heroes, the guy who played Peter Petrelli was dating Hannah Hayden Panettiere.
Yes.
Um, and like it was like the day she turned 18. They're like, we just want to make the announcement that we're going out, like we're a couple. And they're like, you just turned 18, which means you were definitely seeing each other when you were 17, and this was not okay.
Yeah, I remember that. I'm like, because I loved the season 1 of that show.
It was very, very good.
I thought it was super creepy whenever it came out that they were dating.
Same. But yeah, we don't have to go on about the the creepiness of Hollywood stars because well, they're creepy.
Just gives me icky feelings. Scott and Ramona attempt to kiss, and a barrier keeps appearing and knocking them away from each other when they try to kiss. And Scott's like, do I still have to fight all the evil exes? And Steven's like, the game has changed, but the players remain the same. And Knives recommends that they all go to the musical where all the evil exes will be in one place. And that is how episode 7 ends.
Good setup for the next one.
Absolutely. And they bring that musical back that they've been trying to write for like 3 episodes.
I was it was the perfect cliffhanger. I'm like, okay, well, but I'm like, okay, well, how are we going to do this all in one episode? Like, episode 8's the finale. Like, how are we doing this?
There's a lot.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Like they had a lot to resolve. And episode 8 is packed.
Yes, it is. But before we get to episode 8, it is time for Mike's Beer of the Week. This week's beer comes to you from Goose Island, and it is the Bourbon County brand Special Number 4 Stout. I know, that is a mouthful. This is a 13.3% oatmeal stout variant of the original Bourbon County Stout. This beer came out back in 2020 and has been aging for 3 years. If you can't tell, I'm trying to clear out some of my beer fridge. This variant contains coffee and bourbon aged maple syrup. I loved this beer. It was fantastic. You got so many great notes. You got the maple syrup, you got the coffee, you got the stout, you got the bourbon. It was all fantastic. I took it to the yearly bourbon night my friends and I have. Shout out to Lee, my buddy Lee, for hosting bourbon night once again. Bourbon night consists of all of us bringing at least one bottle of bourbon. I think there were 17 bottles of bourbon when it was all said and done. And we drink bourbon, we play video games, we play board games. It's pretty much just a good time of everyone getting together and hanging out for a couple hours. Funny story about Goose Island. The one time I was at a Penguin game with my buddy Lee, and Lee was getting a beer from the concession stand, and he got a Goose Island. And the guy behind him is like, hey, what you got out of that duck head? So my friends and I always call Goose Island Duckhead because their tap is a duck head. Well, really, it's a goose head. The average untapped rating is a 4.1, and I give it a 4.25. Episode 8. The World versus Scott Pilgrim. I lost it at the start of this episode. We see Todd Ingram getting popcorn at the theater, and he just keeps asking the vendor to put more and more butter on his popcorn. He's like, okay, that's good, thanks. And they zoom out, and he still has a quarter stick of unmelted butter on top of his popcorn. I was just losing it. Dude falls off the vegan train hard.
Yeah, it really went to the complete opposite end of the spectrum there. Meanwhile, by the way, that butter, I don't know if actually does movie butter contain actual dairy in it, because I've heard it's not real butter.
Well, this isn't movie popcorn. This is musical theater popcorn.
Oh well, then yeah, I still don't think that they actually melt butter and put it on top. Just saying, I think it's the
Yeah, I don't either.
same.
That's a big
But
difference between movie and musical theater. I don't know.
also, it's Canada.
Well, they could have different regulations surrounding what you call butter and popcorn.
We see Ramona skating towards Todd, carrying his butter with a side of popcorn, and she launches Scott out of her bag. Scott punches the popcorn out of Todd's hands and challenges him to a fight. Todd begins to laugh. He's like, dude, I have no reason to fight you. I have a new obsession. It's Wallace. Speaking of Wallace, I'm going to ask you all these questions as well as like, get over it. We're not together anymore. Todd's like, there were sparks, Wallace. There were sparks. And Wallace is like, sparks aren't real.
It did make me laugh.
Todd also tells Scott he owes him a new bucket of butter. We then get a montage of Scott challenging the exes to fights. First, he challenges Matthew, and Matthew just walks away saying he needs to save his voice. Gordon and Julie then walk in, and Gordon offers to shake Scott's hand as the fight music begins to play, and they just walk off. Lucas and Roxy then enter the theater, and they take out the paparazzi ninjas. And Scott's like, hey, do either of you know anything about the force field preventing Ramona and I from kissing? They both say nope, and they walk off. The Katayanagi twins then show up, and they're saying, Scott Pilgrim. And Scott squares up ready to fight, and we learn that they're reading from the show bill. And they say, we have no reason to fight. As our robot says in the future, we're all bros. Ramona then says, well, that rules out all the evil Exes. And Scott's like, this finale sucks. Which I got a good laugh out of with it being the season finale.
They're just so meta all the time.
Before the intro credits begin to roll, we see that there are fireworks and dynamite and all types of explosives high above the stage. After the opening credits, we're in the seats for the musical, and young Neil is reading that the musical is based off a piece by old young Neil, and he wonders if there's any relation.
Frickin' young Neil.
I loved it. I love what they did with young Neil in this show. He was such an underutilized character in the movie, and he is providing some of the best comedy bits in this show.
He's just really stupid.
I was getting a little annoyed. I think it was last week or the week prior, but like this week, the young Neil jokes are they're right on. They're really good.
We then get a montage of all the musical pieces from the musical, and I know I said it before, but I would totally see this musical.
We got the bread makes you fat line.
I loved it.
I also love that.
They're in the finale of the musical, and Gordon goes to set off the button for the dynamite when a weird vortex appears and starts engulfing everyone. The title card for this episode is to a reference to The Clash at Demon Head, a game that I've never played, and I don't know if I've ever even heard of it. But I also loved how this was a reference to Envy's band, so I thought that was really neat. We learn that everyone is transported to the subspace highway, and Gordon and Jolie then reveal that they put dynamite above the stage, and they were going to just blow it all up. And everyone's like, dude, that's not cool. Someone seriously could have got hurt. And like everyone's giving them shit for it.
As they should.
A silhouetted figure appears, telling them to shut up. And we learn that it is even older Scott, which I love the naming here. We have old Scott, and now we have even older Scott.
I love it.
He's now 47 years old, and his mental health and well-being are unknown. I also dug the buff Ryu look even older Scott has going. Regular Scott's like, "Oh, it's good to see you," and even older Scott doesn't say anything. He just starts kicking the crap out of regular Scott.
The fight scenes here are pretty good. I was kind of impressed by the way they did some of this.
I agree. I thought it looked really good this whole last episode.
I loved these fights. The visuals were fantastic in this episode. Ramona steps in front of a beaten down regular Scott, and regular Scott then realizes it was even older Scott who created the kissing barrier. And even older Scott is like, "Oh yes, the AK fields," and they're like, "AK?" He's like, "Anti-kissing." And we learn that the AK fields are impenetrable.
Oh my gosh, when they show like him looking through like the microscope and stuff, and then, like and and they show like the little almost like 8-bit um like little nanites or whatever they are, bacteria. I can't remember what he said they were. But the little things that stop the particles that stop the kissing, they're just like, I don't know, they just like look little like 8-bit bat bugs, and I don't know, I lost it. I thought it was way too funny.
It was fantastic. Weren't the bug? It looked. I can't remember, but weren't the bugs from Dr. Mario or something similar?
Oh, they
The
might have been
little
similar to the
viruses.
Dr. Mario. Yeah, the
Yes.
viruses. Yeah, they might. I don't know if they're from that, but they were certainly similar.
Yeah. Even older Scott says he's here because nothing changed after regular Scott went back to the present day. And he begins on an evil diatribe. And I love how Gordon interrupts it. He's like, "Bro, take it from me. I appreciate the evil, but I got my own evil plan that I need to take care of. You mind sending me back?" We learn that even older Scott moved back into Wallace's old apartment and began training for 10 years, and saying the only way to end this is him versus the world. Ramona pulls out her hammer from her bag, and we learn that it has a plus 10 stat boost versus elders.
That's so specific. How many elders are she smacking with her hammer?
Also, love that this dude is considered an elder. He's 47. He's not like he's old, but he's not like that old. But
Yeah,
yeah, I guess he is an elder. I guess it depends on how you define elder.
I was going to say, it could just be like, elder in this case could be just anyone older than the person.
Yeah, it could be that.
I mean, we have to respect Turtle being our elder.
oh, am I the oldest?
I'm pretty. You're older than me.
The elder turtle.
The elder
Damn.
turtle.
You kids get off my lawn!
Yeah, there was young turtle, and now there's elder turtle. And there's even elder turtle later.
We don't want to talk about that one.
Yeah.
I know I say it every episode, but I loved the fight scene for even older Scott versus everyone. How, like, on the right side, you literally had Scott and Ramona and all the Evil Exes and the whole Sex Bomb crew. It was fantastic.
I do like how they like incorporated everybody for this last sequence.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool. You know, give everyone one last chance to shine here.
Ramona starts attacking even older Scott with her hammer, and she gets a couple good blows in. And then even older Scott just breaks Ramona's hammer with his face. Which
plus 10 must not have been a good enough bonus.
Nope. Like, Turtle, that feels like something your boy Thorkel would do.
Absolutely. He would totally do it. He would probably eat the hammer.
Thorkel would have lost all his teeth and then just started laughing.
Yep, that's him.
Knives shows concern after young Scott gets knocked away. But instead of running towards Scott, she runs towards Ramona, asking if she's okay and if she has anything besides the hammer. And Ramona's like, "Well, now that you mention it," Ramona gives knives from her bag. But even older Scott knocks her away easily.
He punched the highlights out of her hair. He punched the highlights out of her hair.
Another reference I wish we got.
Yeah, I know. I wanted someone to say it during the episode.
Matthew Patel then takes his turn at fighting even older Scott, as we see Lucas, Roxy, and Todd pulling stuff out of the bag. Lucas pulls out a skateboard. Roxy pulls out a sword. And Todd pulls out a piece of broccoli. And he's like, I love how he looks at it. He's like, what the fuck am I supposed to do with this?
Oh,
He then eats it to regain his vegan powers.
As it should be.
that was pretty funny.
Matthew, Lucas, Roxy, and Todd then work together to knock even older Scott down. And it seems like they're getting the upper hand until even older Scott bulks up and knocks him all away easily.
I mean, you have to remember that young Scott was able to beat all of these X's. So buff, even older Scott, easily take him down.
And you have to figure that even older Scott has fought these X's. So he knows all of their moves.
True.
The twins' robot tries to attack, and he just gets pulverized.
That was pretty funny.
He's like, I'm going to shoot off my little two fists at you. And it does absolutely nothing.
I really laughed at the failed rocket punch.
Gordon then tries to fire off a beam, and it's easily blocked. Everyone besides Scott and Ramona gets transported back to the theater. And young Scott is telling even older Scott, you have to let me live my life, and the choices that you made were your choices. Ramona had nothing to do with this. Ramona runs to Scott and wonders if even older Scott is right. Maybe they just shouldn't be together, and maybe that if they will, they'll get divorced. And young Scott's like, no, we won't. Like, that's not going to happen. We're different. Future Ramona then shows up. And her age is even older, but in parentheses, but still don't ask. She then starts chewing out even older Scott and says it's been 10 years and they only had one rough patch. Like, wasn't a reason to go off on this, like, crusade to stop them from ever dating. And she's like, you put these 10 years into training. Why didn't you put that work into working things out with the two of us? And she's like, I only needed a little bit of space.
Yeah, to be fair though, gents, if a woman wants space, a lot of times it might just be over. Depending. Depending.
Ramona asks aloud if she should just skate away. And even older Scott is like, yeah, go do that. Skate away. Skate away from the thing you love, just like you always do. And Ramona begins to realize that she would dump everyone when things got too serious. And we see flashbacks of her leaving Matthew and Lucas and Todd and Roxy and the twins and Gideon. And then Ramona looks at future Ramona and says, I choose you. And they hug and form Super Ramona. And young Scott's just like, just like in Sonic the Hedgehog 3. And even older Scott's like, just like in Sonic the Hedgehog 2. I mean, just like in Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Getting all the Sonic the Hedgehog references this episode.
Yeah, I wish I was any good at Sonic games, but those old school ones, I'm so bad at platforming games. So I'd play like Sonic 2 and I would get to like, I don't know, the water level and I would just
I
lose. And
I
I'm
could
like,
never
"Oh."
get past. That was the one level I could never get past in Sonic games was the water level.
And I'm like, well, I just suck. So I like Sonic. Sonic Adventure 2 Battle is a fantastic game. However, um, yeah, I did not play the third game because I was so bad at the second one.
Were you guys waiting for Super Ramona to get the Smash Ball and to go Super Saiyan Goku on him?
Yeah, I was kind of waiting for something a little bit more, violent with that transformation from what we got, but
I was wondering that too, like some telekinesis, just throwing even older Scott like away really far.
I mean, Super Ramona does snap her fingers to return even older Scott back to his own timeline.
That is true.
And Super Ramona goes to kiss Scott, and the barrier is still there, but eventually she's able to try kissing him enough that it shatters the barrier. After they kiss, Super Ramona tells Scott that she loves him and that her past doesn't define her. Back in the theater, Matthew gets a standing ovation. Ramona and Scott kiss, and they see sparks.
Gotta love the sparks.
Gotta love the sparks. The hipster demon chicks are able to defuse the dynamite and bring Gordon and Jolie to Matthew. And Matthew's like, why did you do this? Why did you try like sabotaging my show? And Gordon's like, maybe I am evil. I was just so mad that you took everything from me. And Matthew's like, I don't want to be CEO. It sucks. I lost so much money. And Matthew's like, how about this? You take everything back. You take your empire back. You just leave me with my show. And they agree. And they all start laughing. And we get some menacing looking shadows behind behind Matthew, Gordon, and Jolie. Scott is back in Sexbomb as the bass player, and we learn that they added Knives as a keyboard player. Ramona claps for them, saying, see, you guys don't suck. And young Neil is still just playing his Nintendo DS during all this.
Gotta love young Neil.
I love how the show calls out the epilogue. We just, in big letters, epilogue appears on the screen.
Well, they're just letting us know what it is.
Yeah, I mean, usually we get the epilogue to a season as the end credits are playing in other animes. But I really like this epilogue idea to show how all the characters of the show carry on with the rest of their lives, like how their days go on after everything happens.
I think some shows need an epilogue that don't do it. I think that's a little bookend to be like, all right, all the major events have ended. Here's kind of what goes on with, regular life before we leave.
For the epilogue, we see Envy recording a new song that Steven and Knives wrote, and they're Steven and Knives are celebrating as she sings it. We learn that Ramona is still doing stunt work, and young Neil is still driving her around the set. The Simon Pegg and Nick Frost security guards are back, and I lost it when they were eating Cornetto ice cream cones.
Wait, were they really eating Cornetto?
Yep,
That I did not catch that reference.
I lost it.
For people who don't know, I guess, because it's actually a pretty specific reference. Simon Pegg and Nick Frost star in Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and The World's End.
Yes.
Those are the three movies, and they call it the Cornetto trilogy. So, for people who don't know that, those are three very good movies. So check them out.
We learn that the Scott Pilgrim musical has won 27 Tony Awards. We see Todd is back to training his vegan powers as Roxy cheers him on, going, vegan powers, vegan powers, vegan powers. We learn that Kim's old video store has closed forever.
I like that. That was funny.
I love how I got a good chuckle out of how they added forever to the closed sign.
Blame Netflix.
It's all the the subspace highways faults.
Too good at delivering DVDs.
We learn that Lucas is a superstar barista at Julie's coffee shop. Kim walks in and says, whatever, to Lucas and walks out of the store, or out of the shop. And to me, it seemed like Lucas started to crush on Kim after this happened.
Yeah, I don't know what was happening there.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
The twins and their robot are reading self-help books on redeeming themselves. We see Wallace in Paris treating himself using all the money that he earned off the movie that was never made. He then meets another Canadian abroad, and they laugh about how terrible their French is, and they kiss by the water, and Wallace is shocked that sparks are real.
That's what just last episode saying they aren't.
Thought that was a nice callback. We see Ramona, and to end the episode, Ramona is once again dyeing her hair. But no cat this time. The credits then begin to roll, but not for too long as we get a mid-credit scene of Julie and Gordon back in Gordon's headquarters, and they're watching all the screens. And Gordon says, now for their real game to begin. To which Julie replies, the goose is loose. Honk, honk, bleepers.
I don't know who wrote that line, but good on you.
That was hilarious.
I lost it. I'm like, this is fantastic.
I was laughing so hard after that. The goose is loose.
Honk, honk.
Too funny.
While this seems like a possible teaser for season 2, it seems like a season 2 is not guaranteed or even planned at this point. as the showrunners are happy with the story that they told and they feel like the story is contained in season 1 and they have currently no plans for season 2. Granted, that can change, but as of now, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off is planned to be a one season show.
I don't even know what you would do in a season 2 besides like retell the movie plot, which kind of doesn't make sense for the evil exes to reunite to be evil again after the show. So I can't see a season 2.
They would have to introduce like original characters, I think. I don't see how you could do it with the same cast because we got like a complete story with their character arcs.
Yeah.
So I think you'd have to like introduce new characters who are either like very minor characters from the book or movie, and then you would have to find some way to integrate them organically into the plot with the existing characters. So and also I'd worry about getting the cast back because they probably had to shell out a good bit of dough, and if they got a second season, I'm worried they would cheap out and not pay the high. We're talking like some of these actors are pretty expensive, so like they're well known actors. So I would just worry that they wouldn't pay them to get the big names back.
So before we discuss the season in general, what did the two of you think of these 2 episodes?
Yeah, they were good. I think they were probably the best two in the series, which is good. You want the strong finish. So for me, they were the best two in the series. Doesn't mean they were for you guys, of course. Um, I like the way they wrapped things up. I don't know how I feel about essentially like the movie slash book version of Scott is extremely unsuccessful in his relationship with Ramona. Like like they take away our happily ever after kind of from the movie, and that kind of bumps me out because they pretty much say like we didn't tell the story right. So I guess we're gonna retell to you now correctly, which is fine. I'd heard that the writer had kind of indicated before that he feels like people still kind of miss the point of his work, despite reading like the book and seeing the movie. He's like, yeah, I feel like people kind of missed the point, so I'm gonna like retell it again in a different way. But I don't know. It just is kind of a bummer that if you watch or if you partake in the original source material, it's like the bad ending. I don't know how you guys feel about that.
Yeah, I don't know how you can make a season 2. Yeah, like this, like it retold the source material in a cool way, that in a modern way. Like the original book, the first book came out back in 2004, and it was like one book a year, pretty much leading into the release of the movie. It's from 2004 to 2010, and I thought they did a great job modernizing that story while still giving the charm of the original. Yes, we lost some of the funny references, but like I thought they did a great job with it.
A good point, Mike, because they, how do I say it? Uh, Women are more empowered now, like or at least society generally encourages women to be more empowered. I like to think so. Having Ramona confront her exes and even fight for herself is like a more uplifting tale than having Scott fight her exes. Kind of like treating her as a trophy to be won is incorrect. Having her, at the end when Scott gains the, at the end of the movie, like whenever he has the sword and he's like, he's gained the power of self respect. I feel like Ramona also gains some level of self respect in this series when she goes super Ramona at the very end.
It was just nice to see Ramona and her exes get closure with each other. I mean, we didn't get to see Scott and Envy get closure like we do in the movie, but Scott also really wasn't the main character of this show.
Ramona was really the main character for sure.
I thought these 2 episodes were fantastic. I mean, that shouldn't come as a shock to anyone. The fight scenes were fantastic. The story beats were fantastic. The comedy bits were fantastic. I am very bummed that this show is over.
I mean, I really enjoyed these 2 episodes. They're probably, like, if especially the way we watch these are kinda 2 at a time. As far as, like, both of these episodes as a pair, I think they're the strongest ones. I really like the fight scene, in the episode 8, the last one. It had a nice story wrap up, had an epilogue to show what the characters are up to. I just think it was great. And, totally off topic, to go back to the, buttered popcorn topping, it contains 0% butter. That's how I feel about these episodes. I had to Google it while we were researching, and I'm looking it up, and I'm like, "Yeah, it's not butter. It has, artificial butter flavor, but there's no butter." So there you go. For
I've heard
those
they
who
also
wanted to know.
contain shellfish. If you have a shellfish allergy, apparently you're not
Mm.
supposed to have uh, movie theater butter.
The one that I saw contained soy, so some people are allergic to that too, so
Mm.
gotta watch. But there's no butter.
And now it is time for the Evil X of the Week. Turtle, who's your Evil X and why?
I'm gonna go with Gordon Goose because he was gonna blow up the theater. Do you know how many people he was gonna kill? I know it was all set like around, Matthew Patel, but like you blow up that portion, the roof's gonna cave in and still hurt a lot of people who aren't involved in this whole disagreement with these two or history with these two. So I'm going with Gordon Goose for threatening to murder a theater room of people.
Sean, who's your Evil X and why?
I'm gonna pick even older Scott. He essentially becomes an evil X at the very end there, and this dude's buff. He's right. Even older Scott did nothing wrong. I'm kidding, by the way. Uh, Dude was off his rocker crazy. Obviously, had an extreme reaction to Ramona needing some space, and instead of trying to reconcile his differences with her or seeking couples therapy, he just becomes mopey and runs away from his problems. And it's compelling, and it's a lesson to present Scott to don't be this guy. If she asks space, give her some space, and then try and fix your problems. So, yeah, I would pick even older Scott. He had a pretty wild section of the story, and he wailed on all the other evil exes.
People, work on your communication skills. For my Evil X, I'm going to say the X's we make along the way. It just sort of ties the entire show together. Ramona gives them all closure. They all get to move on. They all help Scott in the end in the fight against even older Scott. Knives becomes somewhat of an ex to Scott, but then they become bandmates. So, like, it's just cool to see how they all, in the end, sort of become a happy family in a weird way. Do the two of you have anything further to discuss about the season? Or do you feel like you guys have covered your season thoughts as
Uh,
is?
my last thought is I don't think we really need a sequel, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
I agree. I liked it. It was a fun time. I could see where, fans would want more, but I don't think there's really anything else to say with this show. I think they said everything they wanted to say. And it, does kind of end on a happy note where, everyone is together with who they want to be with and everyone's happy, even if they're not together with the person that they thought they wanted to be with. And it was a fun watch. The animation was cool. Very, very unique art style. I liked it. I don't think we need a season 2. There's nothing there.
Love this show. We need to get Turtle to watch the movie again so he can catch up on all the references from the show.
Yeah, it's on Netflix now. I should watch it.
It is. And it's not that long. But yeah, I agree with the two of you. We don't need a season 2. As much as I would love to get more Scott Pilgrim content, I don't see how you can do it without making it suffer. The fact that we got this show at all made me extremely happy. And yeah, I might have to go back and watch the movie myself just because it's so freaking good. Thank you all for joining us this week as we concluded our watch of Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. We hope you join us in 2 weeks. That's right, we will be taking next week off for the week of Christmas. We will be back in 2 weeks on January 5th, 2024, for episode 39 of the Anime Banter podcast, where we will have our end of the year special. Please give us a 5-star review on all platforms that allow reviews. If you are listening on YouTube, please like the video, hit the notification bell, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. Turtle, do you have anything you would like to plug?
As always, you can find me on my YouTube channel, RPG Treasure Trove, where I sit down with a friend couch co-op style and play through an RPG game. So if you're into that kind of thing, please check me out, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Leave some comments if you want to chat.
Sean, do you have anything you would like to plug?
As always, please listen to the Deepman Files. We're approaching the mid-season finale, so please give us a listen.
The Anime Banter podcast can be found on Facebook, X, Instagram, Threads, and YouTube. Thank you all for joining, and we will talk to you next week.